Literally have 3 beverages here in front of me. Anyone else do this? Just casual 3 beverages. Here we go. What's up, y'all, and welcome back to Pop Cultured. I'm your host, Carrie Lippert Gillaspie. That's my executive producer, Cedric, always here joining me, making sure that I'm staying on top of things. We are your humble pop culture servants, here to give you all the latest and greatest news in the pop culture world from the past week. Now, unless you have been living under a rock, then you probably know that Harry and Meghan blew up the royal family, blew up the pop culture world in the past week. And that's pretty much all today's episode is really going to be centered around. A lot of the news from the week was about the actual interview, but then the fallout that ensued, and there were several stories that just kind of branched off that story. So today's show is going to be all about the interview and the news that has come following that interview. We have a lot to get to, so let's dive in. Let's not waste any time. Let's get you pop cultured. So our first most pressing and obvious story is just the interview as a whole and everything that we found out in that interview. So that is our story number 1. Let's dive into what happened. And I'm going to give you my biggest takeaways from the interview, what Harry and Meghan shared with us, and what those things mean. On Sunday, March 7th, Meghan Markle sat down with Oprah Winfrey for a 2-hour interview that aired. They were later joined by her husband, Prince Harry, but for the most part, this interview was centered around Meghan and her experiences. And really, Harry came in to add in some thoughts and really give more context to the interview, but this was a Meghan interview for the most part. My first big takeaway from this interview was the fiasco with Kate and Kate making Meghan cry and the whole fiasco that ensued over that. First of all, I was just really surprised at how much detail this interview went into as a whole. The royal family is notoriously extremely private, and they do not comment on any private matters whatsoever. This is like the name of the game as royals, is smile and wave, smile and wave. And when things do come about, you give some generic response and wait till the media moves on. But this whole interview really spilled the beans, and the fact that Meghan was so forthcoming about Kate being mad at her and Kate making her cry was mind-blowing to me. And she really came forward with this information because the press had the story backwards, saying that Meghan made Kate cry. And this was Meghan's opportunity to really open up the playing field and say, actually, it was quite the opposite. So we've long heard rumblings in the press that Meghan and Kate have a relationship that has been rocky at times, but we've never had any confirmation of that until her coming forward with this statement and saying that there really has been rocky times, and one of them happened when Kate made her cry in preparation for her own wedding. Now, Meghan did go on and say that the whole thing was resolved, that it was just a high tension moment, that Kate apologized, she gave her flowers, and the whole thing, was just a wedding, leading up to the wedding type of thing. And that happens. I've been married, I've been in weddings, emotions run high and stuff like that happens from time to time. So I don't take this as like their relationship is horrible, they hate each other. I don't take it as that, but I do take it as the fact that this is obvious, proof that their relationship has gone through some rocky times. The second biggest takeaway from this interview was them talking about Archie and him not getting a title and him not being granted security. Supposedly, these conversations were going on when Meghan was pregnant. They were talking about how this would be handled, and I think this is pretty kosher of how they handle when there's a new baby that comes into the family. They go through and decide and, map all this stuff out of how it's gonna go. And it was decided that Archie would not get a title. Now, I've heard reports that this is misleading because technically, because of his status, he's not a direct descendant of the throne yet. He would not get a title no matter what. So I've heard that this report and what she said in this interview was a little misleading for people who don't understand how it goes. Because he is so far down the line, and like I said, he's not a direct descendant yet, he wouldn't get a title. The time when he would get a title, from what I am understanding, what I have heard, is when Charles becomes king, because at that point, then he would be a direct descendant of the king. As it is right now with the queen, he's several, steps down, and he's not, in direct line for the throne. So until Charles becomes king, I've heard that it's pretty kosher and normal that Archie would not be given a title. This also opened up the fact that when it was announced that Archie wouldn't be given a title back when she was pregnant and when he was first born, it was really announced that Meghan and Harry had decided that he wasn't going to have a title. That's how it came out to the press. Meghan and Harry have decided they want Archie to be normal, and they have decided to forego him having a title. But Meghan coming out and saying this really gives us the clarity that it wasn't their decision and that it was really decided on by the higher ups. My second biggest takeaway from this interview, and the second most alarming thing in my opinion, is that Meghan admitted that she had suicidal thoughts and was very, very, very much in a dark place. And even that she went to the higher ups and told them that she wanted help, that she was not well, she was having these thoughts. She went and told them that, and they told her basically to sit down, little girl, and that they couldn't really do anything for her because it would look bad on the institution. This was another time when I was almost besides myself. I could not believe what I was hearing, that this was something that was being said, that this is the way she was being treated. Someone admitting that they are suicidal is extremely vulnerable thing to do. And the fact that she did it, to these people, and they told her basically to sit down and shut up, is so disturbing on so many levels. Then the fact that she was brave enough to open up about that on TV is a whole nother level of bravery and vulnerability. And I felt for her so strongly in that moment when she decided to divulge that information. I can't imagine admitting that you need that help and want that help, and someone just telling you that, to go kick rocks. That's insane. My other big takeaways came when Harry joined the party and weighed in on some of these things. The next big takeaway was that Harry admitted that Charles had stopped taking his calls. Charles is, of course, his father. Harry admitted just casually, kind of as he was talking to Oprah, that his father stopped taking his calls. This is big to me because, in my opinion, the press has always painted the feud between Will and Harry, that there's always been, the struggle of power between the brothers, and that has mostly been where the feuds and the not seeing eye to eye on things has come, is between the brothers. But when Harry really divulged that information, it really painted a picture that there might be, and probably is, more of a struggle here between Harry and his father rather than Harry and Will. My next key takeaway from the interview really piggybacks off that last one, when Harry admitted that he was trapped in the system and unable to get himself out until he met Meghan, and really she opened his eyes to what was going on. And he also more, surprisingly, or more, cryptically, said that his brother and his father were also trapped in this system. I think trapped is a very specific word. I don't know if I would call them trapped per se as an outsider, but they are the product of this system, right? And they have bought into it. They have spent their entire lives being a product of this system, of the monarchy, and being groomed for what it will mean for them someday. I don't know if trapped was the best word to use, but yes, they are very much intertwined, and it's not as easy for them to just wake up and say, I think I'm gonna take some time off. It's not that simple. And even, if they wanted to do things differently per se, or to mold things differently, or to really create systematic change within the monarchy and the way things happen in there, it's not as simple as you think. And Harry saying that they were trapped, or, putting them in this narrative of being trapped, really brought attention to that. And it really opened our eyes, if it wasn't already before, to the fact that things are not always as they seem. And the monarchy is a family, but it is also an institution. We heard Meghan several times refer to, the monarchy as the firm. That is her saying that there is the family, and then there is the institution that encompasses a lot of other people at the top, a lot of higher ups, a lot of power, a lot of this is how it's always been, so why would we change it? This is tradition. The British monarchy is really rooted in this tradition, and that is very precious to these people who are at the higher up, positions of the monarchy. My last and final big takeaway was really not one specific thing they said, but just an overall vibe that I got from the interview. And that is that Meghan and Harry really conveyed the fact that they truly didn't want to leave or picture themselves ever leaving as senior royals. They really conveyed that they were forced to do this and that they had really no other choice because they had been pushed so much to their limits of what they could take and what needs they needed to be met as people and as a family. When Megxit happened, a lot of people were saying that this was part of her plan all along, was to go in there, infiltrate the royal family, take Harry out and leave, come back to Hollywood and make a shit ton of money off of just, being Harry and Meghan. A lot of people said that that was her plan from the beginning. I don't think it was, and I think that they reiterated that in this interview. I think their plan was to be a part of the family for better or for worse, till death do they part. I think they pictured themselves doing this forever. But as things escalated and as the microaggressions toward Meghan happened, everything she faced, the race issues, the issues with her son and her family, and the lack of protection. She talked several times about protection in this and how she felt she was being lied to in terms of the protection they would have and how they would be treated. As that escalated, they could no longer endure that as a family for themselves, as a married couple, but then also as they're bringing their son into the world. It really seems to me that this all came to a head when they had their son, that they put up with a lot, and they could put up with all the garbage. They could put up with the garbage when it was just them. But as soon as they started, having kids, having Archie, things got more serious, and they started to see how, as things were, it couldn't continue because it was going to negatively affect them in a serious way. And that's when I think they really put up that boundary and said, if things don't change, we have to leave. And they did leave. So that was the other last big key takeaway for me, was that they didn't really want to leave, but they felt like they were forced to leave because nothing that they said, the changes that they said they needed to be made, the help that they needed, the systematic changes that needed to go on for Meghan's safety and for her sake as a biracial American woman, none of that was being taken into account. So they were truly forced to leave. I want to talk quickly some about the criticisms that this interview has been garnering, and it should. Everything that happens when you put it out into the world, as a content creator, I know that when you create something and you put it out into the world, you're opening yourself up to criticism, and people can be very, very strong and opinionated about that criticism. So I want to talk about that. The first criticism that I'm getting is that it was nothing but a whine fest, that they just spent the entire time whining and moaning about this, that, and the other thing. To that, I want to say that it was their version, it was their way to tell their side of the story. They have spent the first 4 years of their relationship, the first 4 years of their life together in the public eye under a very specific microscope, but they've only been able to share very specific things, and they feel like a lot of misinformation and a lot of lies have been spread about them. And this was their opportunity to speak freely and to reclaim a narrative about the truth. I think they really want people to hear the truth according to them in some ways. And they have that right. In terms of it being a whine fest, it sounds like they have stuff to whine about. Why are we getting mad about someone being upset about being racially profiled or racially treated insensitively? Yeah, you have a right to whine about that. She has a right to whine about those things. She has a right to talk about the fact that, people in the family or in the institution talking about the color of her son's skin, is troublesome. She has a right to whine about that. And us viewing people coming forward with these things as whining is part of the problem. When things like this happen, when institutions that have been around for years and years and years and years and years are never challenged or never held to a standard, that's not good. We need to listen to these things. I'm not saying that they need to go out and change the monarchy to whatever Harry and Meghan say. I'm not saying that. But they at least need to listen and see where the shortcomings are and try and make it better for the future and better for the generation that it's actually serving. This interview, in my opinion, is the perfect reminder for the fact that things are not always as they seem on the surface. We do not have royals here in America. We do not have a monarchy, but we do have politicians, and we have royal-ish families. The Kennedys were, kind of the royal family. We have these families that are ingrained in our society, and we hold on pedestals, and for better or for worse or whatever it is. But politics is the same way, and my family has been involved in politics. I was a political science minor. I spent time working in politics for a little bit in college, and I have seen it directly with my own eyes that it is not always what it seems. There are a lot of people in power in Washington, in our states, in our local government who are maybe corrupt, or who maybe have ulterior motives, or who maybe keep everything together in a very shady way. And on the surface, it looks like one thing. It looks like they're standout people, or they are, sacrificing themselves for the good of the community, the country, what have you. It can really look like that. But sometimes that is just a very well kept up and painted facade. I am not saying that every politician is corrupt and that every person in a position of power is a piece of shit. I don't believe that. But I do think that sometimes, as I said, what is portrayed on the surface is not always what's going on behind the scenes. Whew. That was a lot of news, you guys. I hope that you took it all in. I hope that some of my commentary kind of explained some of it, or gave you a new perspective on it, or whatever it is. Just a lot of stuff coming from across the pond this week. That's gonna wrap up today's show, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I am so appreciative that you let me do these little pop culture deep dives. They are so fun for me, and it's fun to have you along as part of the community. If you are a fan of the show and you liked this episode, please give this video a thumbs up, and please subscribe so that you don't miss future shows. As always, I would love to hear your comments about anything I talked about today. Put them in the comments below. In the meantime, you can find me in daily life on Instagram. I am at Carrie.Gillaspie. That's gonna do it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. You have officially been pop cultured.